Alright guys, welcome to the video on how to use the SUMX, AVERAGEX and so on and so forth using DAX in Microsoft Power BI desktop. So now in the previous video we calculated the revenue, the cost of operation and the net profit and the rest of these guys. So to calculate the revenue, the first thing that we did was to calculate the total sales, and the total sales involves using total sales price multiplied by units sold. So we had to create a measure that calculates the total sales using the sales price multiplied by the units sold. Then at the end of the day, we now used the revenue, which is the sum. We now use sum to calculate the revenue. Now this allows us, or this made us to use two different measures, or to create two different measures to achieve a particular goal. Now in the case when we actually want to optimize this and make it in a single process, we can use the function called SUMX. So how does it work? We can say, hey, you know what? We want to calculate revenue 2. So instead of us to calculate the total sales, then now do the sum of the revenue, we simply want to do it in the single process. So we can say SUMX, that is, we want to SUMX, we want to sum up an expression in what table? So it has two arguments, table and the expression inside of financial, comma. Now what is the expression? That is, what do you want to sum up together? Now I'm going to say I want to sum up the multiplication of units sold multiplied by the sale price. Don't forget, we calculated the sale price multiplied by units sold to get the total sales. Then we now did the sum. But in this case, we are basically saying, hey, you know what? I want you to calculate units sold multiplied by sales price. Then after doing that, then sum it up for me. So sum an expression, that is what this function is going to be doing. Calculate the sales price multiplied by units sold. Whatever results that you get there for each row, then sum all of them up for me. Then when you run your query, when you run your code or your DAX expression, then let's say revenue 2, pull it in, then we're going to see that we have exactly the same result as the revenue. So instead of you to create multiple measures, you can simply put that in a single way without having to calculate or create measures that you may not need at the later end of your analysis. We can also do the same thing for the AVERAGEX. So AVERAGEX is the same way that we're doing the SUMX. So instead of you to calculate this guy multiplied by this guy, then to give you this guy, you can simply just do it straightforward. So we can say AVERAGEX. So we can call this AVERAGEX and call it equals AVERAGEX. Then table financial as usual, comma. Then what is the expression that we want to get the average from? Let's say we want to get the average of the profit. So we can say units sold multiply, or let's say for the cost of operation, units sold multiplied by the manufacturing price. So what we are basically saying here is that multiply units sold and manufacturing price, then whatever result that you get there, then get me the average. So you are trying to iterate based on an expression. So when you run that, then this guy is going to do what is the multiplication of units sold and manufacturing price. Then before giving you the answer, then it's going to find the average directly. So bring in a cat, then AVERAGEX, then pulling in a card, then we are basically going to see that we have 152.38k based on the profit. So this is a way that you can use the SUMX, the AVERAGEX, the MAXX, and so on and so forth. So you can try out how to use MAXX, the MINX, and on the rest of them by yourself. So now let us see how we can calculate the profit margin. So calculating profit margin is essential when it comes to business analysis. Now that we've calculated the revenue, then we've calculated the cost of operation, then we've calculated the net profit, then we may also want to get another KPI that is called profit margin. So to calculate profit margin, we're going to be using the basic and the normal formula for the profit margin, which is profit, and we're going to make use of our net profit divided by the revenue. So let's create a new measure, and we're going to call this guy profit margin. We are going to be trying out two different ways to calculate the profit margin. So we have profit margin equals the net profit net profit divided by revenue using the traditional division divided by revenue. So if you run that, then we are going to have the profit margin. So let me bring in a card, then pull in the profit margin. Then I have 0.17. So that means I have a 0.17 profit margin. When I click on this, I can just say, hey, format it as percentage. Then it's going to tell me 16.63%. Then when it is rounding up, then it's going to be 17% because 16.6, when you round up, then you have 17%. So if you reduce the decimal to 0, then you're basically going to have 17%. So if you say this guy should be 0, then you have 17%, depending on the number of decimal places that you want to add. Another way to calculate the profit margin, because the reason why we usually don't recommend that you use the traditional division, is because this guy cannot divide by 0. So if I say the net profit divided by 0, in this case I'm going to have infinity, which is an error. So the traditional division does not have the ability to divide by 0. So what we are going to be using is a function called divide. So I can say, hey, divide, then we have the numerator and the denominator. So numerator, and you can see the argument says that the self division function has the ability to undo divide by 0 case. So if you have divide by 0, this guy can work. So I have divide. What is the numerator? That is what's going to be at the top end. So I have the net profit. So I want to divide the net profit, comma. In this case, I'm going to be using comma, not slash anymore, because I'm now using a function. Then revenue. Then when I run that, I'm going to have the revenue calculated, which is basically going to be 17%, just like I have it before. So it is recommended that you do not use multiply by 100, because some people may want to use multiply by 100. So if they have this, then they want to say, hey, you know what, let us multiply this guy by 100. So when you multiply by 100, you are not going to have the percentage symbol unless you format as percentage. So when you format as percentage, then you basically just have the percentage sign coming up on your value or the output that you're getting. So this is where I'm going to be rounding it up when it comes to the iterator as an aggregate function, and also how to calculate the profit margin using DAX in Microsoft Power BI desktop. See you in the next video.